all the junior consultants who'd sort of just made consultant, I mean, half of them turned around to me and said, go now. If I'd known what I know now when I was your age, I would have gone, but it's sort of almost too late for me. You know, they had young families, all those kind of things. They had made that commitment by then.
That's really interesting. Welcome to today's episode, where we provide you with something slightly different. We are entering the world of creative design or arts, something that we do tend to cover, but not in as great a detail because it doesn't always seem to be the area where doctors tend to explore as frequently. But I am proud to introduce Joanna Draper, who previously was a core surgical trainee and is now working as the head of interior design for a large interior design company in London. So before we move on to the interview, make sure that you subscribe, leave a review, and make sure you are registered with our mailing list and join our mission of connecting 1 million doctors with the best and diverse career opportunities by going to medicfootprints.org/join our mission. Now on to the interview. Let's face it, burnout amongst doctors is sky high, and we're actively seeking other ways to make the most of our transferable skills beyond the usual career pathways. Welcome to Disrupting Doctors' Careers. I'm your host, Dr. Abena Bubbs-Jones, and I'm on a mission to connect 1 million doctors across the world with the best in diverse career opportunities. Welcome to the Disrupting Doctors' Careers podcast, Joanna. Thank you so much for sharing your story about your move to interior design. I mean, it's not the most common move that doctors have made, but I have come across it quite a few times now. So I think your journey would really be of significant interest to a lot of doctors who are looking to go down, as you described, the creative route. But that in itself is like a massive umbrella. But I'd love to hear more about how you first went on that journey. And so even before you went into medicine, did you have any particular interest in creativity, arts, that kind of thing?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I think it isn't something that everyone has done, and lots of people have approached me since having done it, saying, gosh, how did you transfer to something that seems from the outside so different to what I was doing within medicine? Did I have a creative background? To a certain extent, obviously, the way the British school system works now, I had to give up art, those kind of things, in favour of other subjects quite early on. So I think I gave up true art when I was 13. I kept it up as a side hobby and always liked craft and things as a child. But then obviously as you progress through your education, it becomes chemistry, biology, all that focus. I did do music for quite a long time, but certainly fine art was not something I did. And then as I went through my medical career, I started to crave doing something more creative. And I tried to find outlets in sewing, drawing, all these kind of things in the time that I had off from being in the hospital. And I eventually went into, I was in the London School of Surgery. So I did core surgical training in London in the hope that I would be using my hands and that would provide the outlet I wanted to be doing things. But in the end, I was just like, no, I actually genuinely want to do something that's creative. So that was the impetus for me to step off the medical route and try and do something else.
Brilliant. And just it's interesting to hear, just stepping back, I could echo some of what you said because I had a very strong musical background before I went into medicine and got to a point where it's like musical medicine and I chose medicine. So why did you decide to go down the medicine route when you knew you kind of had that passion bubbling away?
I think I was at a brilliant school. I'm not going to say anything about that, but I think if you have I think a lot of people find this, if you have a certain grades in certain subjects, people sort of go, medicine or law. And
that's why that was my school, pretty much.
Yeah, there's a sort of expectation. And You get put in this basket of you saying early you want to do medicine. I turned around when I was very little and said I wanted to do medicine, and I don't regret having done it, because I think there would always been part of me that would have wanted to try it and tell myself I could do it. So I'm glad I didn't sort of decide to do music and then go back to it as a graduate, because I think I then would have been in a right pickle. But yes, I was sort of channeled into it slightly. And at the time, things like music and even creative arts careers weren't sort of seen as maybe, I say, a viable option. Certainly, they're obviously more financially unstable and all those kind of things. So people, as I say, medicine, law, and I went, okay, science, medicine. But I think there's a lot of doctors who have that balance between music and medicine. I know a lot of musical medics.
Yeah, I mean, I was part of a musical medical society.
Sure.
So yeah, no, it's really interesting. And so you went through your core surgical training, but then at what point did you say, right, I'm actually going to do something about this? What was that like, getting to that point?
It was a very long process. I have to be honest about it. I mean, when I started core surgical training, I was the keenest bean. Wanted, was set on, coming in as high as I possibly could, and all the things you had to get signed off, and really threw myself into the dedicating the hours. And I was there all the time. I was at hospital all the time. I mean, there were times when I was doing cardiothoracics. I think I was there 21 hours a day, just because I was desperate to be in theatre, get my hours. But then obviously, at core surgical training level, you have ward work and all those kind of things to do as well. But I had to have my hours in theatre. So in the end, I think I was ground down by the system. And it may have been partly my own fault for not taking a break. But I think in the end, I just burnt out, essentially. I just couldn't sustain it. And I started looking at it, sort of then started to creep in. And I thought, gosh, how, I think you sort of get to the end of your 20s or sort of mid to late 20s and think, wow, I've got to sustain this for another, 30, 40 years at that point for a career. And I thought, can I manage to sustain this? And I thought, actually, I don't know if I can. And my head said, you've got to really consider what you want to do, a long time before my heart said, okay, you have to let this go now. And I struggled a lot, which I think a lot since leaving, a lot of other people have said to me, with coming to terms with the fact that medicine may not be my whole life. I think you start to get in, or I certainly started to get into a pattern of, because there's obviously a lot of uncertainty when you're training about where you might be, which hospital you might be working in, sort of constant moving every 6 months, every year. I started to not commit to things. I was obviously, again, getting to a period where people had weddings and all these things at weekends, and I never had a rota in time, so I didn't know if I could commit to things, so I'd have to say no. And I started to feel like I was missing out on my life, as opposed to and just throwing everything into, I don't think I was just, unfortunately, sacrificing too much of myself to it. Now, there are probably ways I could have addressed that, but at the time, I really was just like, I think just for my own mental health, I need to step away and think about what I want to do for the rest of my life. You only get to do this once. So I said, I went back to, or looked at what I enjoyed, and looked at doing architecture, just because obviously there is a sort of more physics and science side to that, but that's another 7 years at university and all those kind of things. So I thought that's maybe not a viable option. And then I sort of rediscovered interior design. It was something that I enjoyed, but liked the idea of when I was young, but wasn't a career option then. There weren't courses and things in it in the way there are now. And found... I
just asked, were you doing this whilst you were still working? So that kind of exploratory period where you're looking for other options, were you still in your surgical training?
I finished core surgical training.
Okay.
And then, rather than applying for a number, I had been doing some work at the Royal Marsden. I did one of my placements at the Royal Marsden, and they said they had at the time lots of openings for surgical SHOs. So I became a sort of I say a mixed surgical SHO there. I worked for a number of teams there for a year, essentially, and did shift work there. And actually what I found interesting about that was doing sort of essentially bank shift work. I could take as much annual leave and things as I want and commit to as many shifts as I wanted to. And even by the end of that year, I was like, no, this genuinely isn't for me. But it gave me the opportunity to have a look at what I might be wanting to do. And I stepped away.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting that you, and I have to use this word courage. I've used this on occasion, but for a lot of us, because we've dedicated a lot of our careers and our identity to medicine, and then stepping off that pathway or that conveyor belt, some people call it, travelator, whatever you want to call it, and actually stepping off when a lot of our colleagues, particularly within some of the more competitive specialties, are kind of continuing up that path. I mean, how was it for you to actually take a break? I mean, now depending on how long ago, like now it's that much more common to just say I'm not going to be applying for specialty training this year. But you know, when I was doing it, like most of my peers were moving on to their registrar post, because I did core surgical training as well, and it was really difficult to not apply. You know what I mean, and not keep my options open. So I mean, how did you feel about that, saying, right, I am not committing to anything more and I'm going to play the field in a way?
Yeah, it was, I think I knew deep down at the end of core surgical training that it wasn't for me. I knew it wasn't, but I had to find a way of making enough money to sustain myself through any courses or anything, or a period of non-working. So I think you had to overcome the fact that I had to say to consultants, because obviously a lot of them, every time you go into theatre with them, like, oh, you're applying for your number, blah, 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 blah. Or, once you've sort of said to a few people, no, I'm not going to apply for my number, they ask questions, but I don't know, I think I batted them off, just evaded them and said, oh, you know, I'm just waiting to see what I want, what actually, because at that time I was doing mainly general surgery. You know, what part, obviously general surgery goes into colorectal, breast, all those kind of things, you know, what part of that I really wanted to do. So I think I can't quite remember, it was 2016, I think I just said, look, I just want to explore which surgical specialty I want to do before I apply for my number. And people seem to understand that. I think it was harder when I had to say I'm going to give up my GMC license at the end of the Marsden training, because I wanted to leave in good faith. So obviously you have to be signed off by somebody to say that you're leaving, and that you're not leaving in disgrace. They sign something saying that you've you know, you're fine, you just decided not to do it, but having to own up to
wait, hold on a second. So you have to get signed off to relinquish your license? If you want to completely
go, because I wanted to keep the door open, but I was very committed to, because you can obviously just sort of go into a pattern where you, I think, pay a sort of holding fee, but I said, look, I generally want to just leave now, I'm done, I'm going. But I do want to be, you know, just sort of disappear and people not wonder, in case for whatever reason
so there's an option
to come back. So provided someone signs you off saying you were good at your job,
you haven't killed anyone,
you can they can write you essentially a letter of commendation to say you were good at your job, you're just stepping away. So I had to go through all that. So I had to admit to one of these consultants that it's hard, because they've obviously spent so much time training and investing in you, that was the biggest hurdle. Although I do say that the biggest surprise to me when I left was that all the, what I would call more senior consultants, those who were coming to the end of their careers, retirement age, were shocked. Gosh, how could you leave? You know, all this sort of thing. But I think it was a time where there were still people on the old consultant contract and things like that. You know, they were in a better position than some of the consultants now. And all the junior consultants who'd sort of just made consultant, I mean, half of them turned around to me and said, go now. If I'd known what I know now when I was your age, I would have gone, but it's sort of almost too late for me. You know, they had young families, all those kind of things. They had made that commitment by then.
That's really interesting.
And it was incredibly eye-opening to me. And I thought, actually, I have made the right decision.
Yeah. I mean, we see a lot of doctors who get to the end of their training and leave.
Yeah.
Like literally CCT, goodbye, I'm off. And I know we talk about, you know, you've got young families and you've got financial commitments, but there are lots of ways to fill in that gap that's actually will probably bring you a greater income than the standard NHS pay and pension. But it's just about knowing how to go about and doing that, right?
No, exactly.
Well, let's move on to the core of this, which is interior design. So tell me a little bit more about, so you made a decision to really explore this. So what was that journey like for you?
So I was fortunate in that obviously I live in central London, and there are a number of design schools in London that offer interior design courses. So I just explored at that time. Because I knew I was starting to get interested in careers within interior design. I read things like House and Garden. A lot of them are advertised in there, and I found a couple of courses which were year-long diplomas, and one particularly was attractive because it was designed for people who had graduated with a different degree, and then wanted to change to interior design. So it was a year's diploma, but it wasn't people who were sort of just coming out of a art foundation course or something like that. It was sort of genuinely career changers more than anything else, and that seemed incredibly attractive to me. And I thought, well, it's ideal. I can do this 1 year.
Were there any other doctors on the course?
No. Lawyers, lots of people coming out of like banking, things like that, marketing, a huge variety actually. Some people who had done like ancient history and things at uni and then decided to change, but quite a lot of people who had careers doing other things. And I think what's interesting about interior design is it does lend itself, well, I can only speak for interior design, I'm sure there's other things as well, is it does lend itself to quite a lot of transferable skills. Because my job now is, I would say, 10% creative, 90% logistics and operations.
Okay, interesting.
Because of
so can you take me through, sorry, I was going to say, like, so I mean, you've done the diploma, and how did you end up finding a job? Because obviously we know a lot of self-employed interior designers, and then there's employed. So how did you decide which route to go down?
Sure. So I was actually very helpfully, I went to a college called KLC. I was very helpfully guided by them on sort of what the options were. You do an internship during only for a couple of weeks, but during your placement. And they have lots of contacts because lots of the industry have been there to college. So then they still have contacts within the industry. So they have their own careers service essentially, which puts up opportunities for junior designers, design assistants, all those things as soon as you are leaving. Now, I was incredibly fortunate in that the place that I interned contacted me before I graduated and said, we've got an opening coming up, would you be interested? So I actually graduated, virtually this week, 6 years ago, I'm on track now, 5 years ago, and had a week off and started on the Monday.
Wow.
And I've worked there ever since.
And what role did they offer you? Like, what kind of work? So, what was it like your first year?
So I went in as a design assistant.
Okay.
So it sort of starts as design assistant, junior designer, middleweight designer, senior designer. And I went in as a design assistant. There was a lot of, I guess, change in the company at the time. And I think what people don't realise, what you're sort of is indoctrinated into you as a medic, is you're sort of only good for medicine. Or that's certainly the way I felt when I came out, that I didn't have any other skills. I was just a medic. Of course, it's complete fallacy. All this, the constant juggling we have to do as doctors, the prioritization, the task management, the time management, thinking about a million things at once, juggling a load of, juggling plates as things are happening all over the shop. dealing with pressure, dealing with difficult people, all these things are incredibly helpful, and give you an interesting perspective on the wider world when you actually enter a completely different career. So I went in as a design assistant, but because it's sort of not the same environment as medicine, i.e. you don't have to do you have to do your year before you can progress to junior designer, and then you have to do 3 years of junior designer, like it is, in medicine, you have to do your designated amount of time. I found that actually these skills were valued quite early on and were recognized as useful. I think in an interesting way, a lot of the people coming into interior design come from a heavily creative background, so perhaps haven't had so much exposure to, dare I say it, but like maths, understanding finance, all this kind of thing.
Well, doctors don't have that much experience or exposure to maths or finance either.
Well, maths I think we do enough anyway.
Not day to day, really. I mean, yeah, we've done research into stats, etc., etc. But on the day to day,
I think
the clinical work.
No, but I mean, I think I don't need extreme maths to do purchasing and things for interior design. But I think, because I do a lot of technical drawing and things now, I think doctors generally have kept maths on longer, maybe, at school than some people who went straight into creative. And so I think coming in, having a background that with a good understanding of maths and things,
scientific background, kind of,
I was at an advantage from the outset. So I actually then, virtually by the end of that same year, I was a junior designer. And then I gradually worked. There was a couple of situations which meant that I ended up having to do a project in the US because my team couldn't go, and I at the time didn't have children and all these kind of things. So I was able to go to New York 12 times in a year.
Whoa.
And so I took advantage of that. And then just, again, luckily through circumstance, the person who ran our department left in the end of 2019, and I was given the job. So I became head of the interior design department in January of 2020. And now I run a team of 8 designers in 5 years since leaving medicine.
That is so impressive. And I think it's quite interesting because you said like 10% of it is creative, but then the majority of it is logistics stuff, which really draws upon your medical background and the skills you've gained from medicine, not necessarily the knowledge of medicine, but the transferable skills. Yeah,
and I think, as you imagine, there's so many different moving parts. I'm sure anyone who's done any kind of house renovation or an extension or anything like that knows you're constantly dealing with a million people, and you need, I have to think about lots of detailing just because of the nature of the work I do with the company I'm with. But every single sofa and chair is bespoke to a certain extent. So I'm working with lots of different suppliers. I've then got to get fabric for it to the right place. I've got to get it fire treated. I've got to get it, it's balancing all those things. And then on top of that, you're dealing with people who often, when they're having their house done, quite stressed. It's just the nature of the beast. Either they're because they're living in the house, or because they've financially invested in it and all these kind of things. So I think you get exposed to so many people as a doctor, and you see reactions to so many things that it's hugely helpful when dealing with people who get quite stressed about a lampshade not arriving or whatever it is. But it's amazing. It's amazing what you can be faced with. And I think it's easier a doctor to be slightly less fazed by that. And I think also, people do lose the plot over certain things, and you can actually physically say to them, it is not life or death if this sofa doesn't arrive. In the grand scheme of things, it is not life or death. you have to just maintain a little bit of perspective. And I think that helps running a team of people now, with people who are more junior than me, and they have a moment when everything, something goes awry, shipment gets lost, whatever it is. But you're able to say, just take a breath. It is going to be fine, and there is a solution to it, without getting overly stressed by it, because what life or death is, I guess. And so I don't get as phased, I think, by things.
Literally. So, I mean, I think that's really insightful. I'd actually like to come on to another question, which a lot of doctors face, and I think we alluded to it earlier, as to the money side of things. So sure. I think one of the biggest sticking points for many doctors, or the worry, is, will I earn enough money to support myself in another industry or sector? So in interior design particularly, let's talk about employed and self-employed, if you have some insights into that. Like, what kind of salary points would doctors expect at a kind of like a junior level to senior, or like where is the boundary of the limit, if there are any limits? Just be great to get some general insights on that.
I think that is something to consider heavily. I have been very fortunate, but you certainly, as you come out of a diploma course in interior design, you can really only expect a salary of between 20 and 25,000, I would suggest. That's the kind of money I'm offering the design assistant, junior designer role. By the time you get to senior designer, you're probably at sort of 45 or 50. More managerial roles, so once you're a director, something like that, then you'd be plus 50. The way people make genuine money is if you are running a successful studio yourself. If you're working for somebody else, it's always going to be capped by just that sort of structure. And we are not a industry that pays huge amounts. I'm going to say that. You have to do it certainly for the love of it, but you, as I say, people who then perhaps do a few years in the industry, get an understanding of how things work, all the sort of small business side of it, which is a huge learning curve. Once you understand all of that, and if you want to set up on your own, then provided you find clients, there's obviously opportunity to earn quite a lot of money.
I know, like, how long is this piece of string, but say, for example, your business, what type of clients do they focus on? And what kind of clients do you tend to work with?
So we are high end. We're sort of the top end of the market. So my boss has been in the industry for 50 years.
Wow.
We have quite a select group. I'm £275 an hour, and my boss is £350 an hour. As a sort of example for. That's obviously not what I'm getting paid, but that's what
you charge the clients.
You pay to work with us. So it's not unusual for me to have a fee structure of kind of £500,000 or something to design people's houses if they've got quite a large property. So yeah, with big budgets is the answer. It's people spending upwards of $1 million on their interior, I would suggest.
So kind of high net worth individuals.
Yeah
Companies as well, I assume.
Sometimes commercial work, members clubs, we do quite a lot of. Hotels, but normally hotel suites, things like that.
Brilliant. And my last question is, do you miss medicine?
Sometimes I miss the operating, I think.
Yeah.
But no, I don't actually. I don't. I enjoyed it for what it was, and I think I stepped away at a time before I really resented it. I was starting to become miserable is the wrong word, but I was not enjoying myself and needed to step away. And I think I did it at the right time, without looking back on it as a horror period of my life. It wasn't a horror period. It was hard work. I enjoyed what it was, but for me, I needed to step away, and I have no regrets about doing that.
Brilliant. Forgot to ask, like, what kind of price point is the diploma?
So I think now it's actually less expensive than when I did it, interestingly.
Okay.
I think now they do more of it online than when I was doing it. I think now it's about 18 or 19,000
for the year.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
19K for the year.
Yeah.
Okay. And finally, if anyone wants to get hold of you or find out more about going into interior design as a doctor, what would you recommend?
To get hold of me,
Yeah.
you can find me on Instagram if you'd like to.
Yeah.
I am under Joanna Draper Design, I think. Or people are very welcome to email me if they wish to email me, which is joannadraper1@gmail.com. Yeah, no, I'm more than happy to take questions afterwards.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time, Joanna.
My pleasure.
It's been so insightful and unique in many ways, because as you've described it, not that many doctors will even consider going down interior design pathway, but it's really important that they have at least the basic insights of what it involves and what the opportunities are to progress in that area. So thank you so much, and best wishes for your plans moving forward.
Thank you ever so much.
Wow, I really hope that you found Joanna's story inspiring for your own career moves into art, interior design industry. I think we've learned a lot of really important take-homes there, not only about interior design in particular, but also about the process that it took for her to move from, what could have been quite an illustrious career as a surgical doctor into something which is completely different. And we know there are several doctors, or thousands of doctors out there who are considering something like that. And as you can see, it is indeed possible, and you can certainly thrive, and you can progress extremely quickly in a leadership position simply because of the skills that you've already learned as a doctor. So I hope you found that useful, and of course we are going to be back again next week with another exciting episode.